the name. I am. So bad with the names of songs, it's terrible. I mean, I almost couldn't even tell you the name of any of his albums. You know, I could tell you every band he was in. I know the lyrics when they come on. I don't even pay attention to those either, but like they, you know, after 30 years, you know.
Here, ma'am. Oh, thanks.
There you go. Get credit. Get credit. So I'm happy for those of you who did remember to bring a laptop. Do you have yours with you? I will go ahead and pull it open when we get started. I'm going to have you guys go log into Utah Real Estate. So we're going to just take care of some, you know, this and that's before we get going on the how-tos. And I'm going to show you how to do this. A lot of people, like, how many of you guys in here generally use the Cloud CMA because it's visually lovely? Okay, so that's good stuff. Like from a visual standpoint, it's a terrible, terrible thing in terms of being able to change valuations, you know, adjust valuations. You have to manually put every single adjustment factor into it if you're going to do that. It's terrible. So just know I've probably listed personally and sold about 600 or 700 homes without Cloud CMA. So I don't think you have to use it to be effective. What do sellers care more about, data or looks? Your home? What's your homework?
No, what's your homework?
Oh, what's your homework?
That's the nuts and bolts.
Jocelyn, do you want to log into Utah Real Estate? I'm going to set you guys up. And recording, everything's all systems go? Yep. You're the best. Thanks, Audrey. I'm sorry. Well, we're recording. Yeah, we're recording this, so that's the good news. Yeah, I'll even watch it with you. We'll just drink some wine and like watch me talk. It'll be great.
You're the best.
I'm the second best, you know it. Okay, so is everybody logged? We'll get started. I just want to make sure everybody's logged into Utah Real Estate. Okay, so go and just do a real quick property search, like all the properties that just came on the market in the last day, right? Just pick a quick property search. Do that with me. Once you've done that, then go ahead and select the first 2, 3 properties. I don't even care. Just select them. So again, I'm just going quick search. Hey, what came active in the last day? I don't really care. None of that's going to matter. You just need some properties here to be able to do this thing that I'm going to teach you how to do. So just pick a couple of properties. That's great. Once you've selected a couple of properties, go to your drop-down menu up here and click on CMA report. Not Cloud CMA, but CMA report right here in green. And click on that. It's just going to drop these into the CMA report that I like to use. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to help you guys get your valuations populated here. All right, so that's the first thing that I wanted to talk with you about. All right, so how do we do that? So once you're here, do you guys have any default adjustments, or do you just use what the MLS comes in? You have some? Well, John, you've probably been trained before, haven't you? Jeff Rowe, same thing. Okay, so I'm pretty sure the two of you guys have this in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in and just kind of create a new, we'll use it as a default, but we're going to create a new adjustment factor scheme here. And so I'm going to teach you how to do this. Yep. Okay, so once you've done that, go to your view reports, drop that down to the CMA report. There you go. Did everybody catch that? Good question. Thanks for catching that. Did you guys catch that? So you've got your, she's writing an offer up. That's great. So now once you're in there, let's see, you want to scroll to the, just 2 is fine. It doesn't matter. All 4 is great. That's fine. Yeah, so as long as you have some, and go to your view reports and select CMA report in there, right? Go to your view report, select CMA report. I'm gonna show you guys how to set up your adjustment factors, and then also we're gonna create some custom adjustment factors in here that get used regularly, all right? So let me know if everybody's caught up, because it is a working class, and I'd only wanna do this once with you, because I am confident of one thing: you're not gonna watch this video. That's why you're here, so you don't have to. So then we're going to go to Create New, the blue button that's in there. Do you see where it is? It says Create New. So let me just back page my thing. So you've got this set up. You've got a couple of properties. As if you're going to do a CMA, you go into, the CMA report. Have you done this, Ryan? Or are you catching up? Yeah. You got it? Let me know when you're there. You see this Create New up on the screen? That's the button that you want to select, and we're going to drop in order the adjustment factors that I've printed off for you on this page. All right? This won't include the custom adjustment factors, but let's go ahead and just do that together. Now, when you drag these things, I prefer to drag them in the order that you see them here, right? Because you can put them in any order that you want to, but you see these available adjustment factors off to the right? This is what we're going to be pulling from and then populating to the left side where it says selected adjustment factors. So if you look on a sheet that I passed out, and I apologize, when she printed this, it did not show up like mine. Here's how mine showed up, right? And then as soon as you go to the printed one that she sent you, it's like, it didn't look that way. Sorry about that, but you'll deal with it. So the very first one on the top, what does that say, the adjustment factor? What's the first adjustment factor up there? Bedrooms. So what you do is you go over to bedrooms on available adjustment factors, left click and drag it over by holding that mouse button down, and then just drag it into there. Okay, and let's give it the value that you see here. So the values that I put on these select adjustment factors here were provided by an appraiser. Now, the one thing that you have to understand is, for instance, a bedroom probably costs more than $1,500 to build. Am I right? And if we start looking at values per square foot, it'll say things like 55 in there. You can't build anything for 55 bucks a square foot. Nothing at all. So why are these values so much lower? Because when you're choosing your comparables, which we're going to get into, you choose apples to apples comparables. The bigger the adjustments that are being made on a CMA, the less accurate your CMA is going to be. So if you have big, giant adjustments that are showing up in your CMA, it's because you don't have the right comparable. You're comparing maybe an apple with an orange. We'll talk more about that. But that's why you see, just in case you had a question of like, how did these values come in? They're provided to me by an appraiser, and that was in 2022. So values haven't really changed a lot since the end of 2022. All right. So go ahead and type in that value. I have it as $1,500. Again, that's provided to me by an appraiser. After the bedrooms, what do we see next? We see full bath. Drag it over, drop it in there, and give it the value that you see, $7,500. Okay. After that, you gonna ask me more trick questions today, Justin Puchar? Okay. I like his style. He's like, what do you charge for hard money? You know what he was doing? He was wondering if he was in the ballpark. And he's like, I loved it, man. It was, dude, you are so clever. That's why. What's that? So the value of the full bath is also here on the printout in front of you. We're doing it in exactly the same order, just in case you can't see it up on the screen. $7,500 for a full, $5,000 for a three-quarter, $3,500 for half. What's next on our list? Level 1 square footage. So let's just go ahead and drop them in order. Level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. You just drop those all in order, and then we can put the values in as what you see. Those are all at 55 bucks a square foot that they're adjusting at. Yes, you can't build a shed for 55 bucks a square foot, right? But remember, these are numbers that are provided by an appraiser. They are used for making adjustments for like properties, not for totally unlike properties, okay? So once we've got our above grade levels, I'll go to my basement square footage. The handout that I have to you is a little bit out of order. I do my basement square footage first, and then I do my finished basement square footage after that. I don't add, it has like basement 2 and basement 3 in there. How many of you guys have had a house that had 3 basements that you had to value? Okay, how many of you had 2? 1? Just one house that had 2 basements? Okay, I've never had that happen to me, but I know where it could happen, so I don't ever put them in there. It's just not the norm. Remember, we're gonna set this as our default, and so this will be our go-to. You can always come back in and add additional adjustment factors later, but because we don't see homes that have 2 or 3 basements very often, I don't add this second basement square footage here. I just don't do that, okay? So I'm taking that out. So I've got basement square footage number 1. So assuming that a basement were unfinished, the cement's worth 20 bucks a square foot, all right? And then the finish is worth 20 bucks a square foot. You can put those in if you like. All right, next is, I put total square foot in here, but I don't give it a value. And the reason why I put the total square foot in there is so it shows total square footage to your client. So when you print out or you email a CMA, your clients don't see things like we do. They don't see things broken down by level, by level, by level, right? How many of your clients have said, well, Zillow's got it all wrong. They don't have my square footage right. Every single one that's ever been on Zillow. Why? Because they don't have the basement square footage correct on Zillow, more often than not, unless it's been on the MLS before. All right, so total square footage, leave it blank, no value there. And then go to your garage capacity, followed by carport capacity. You know, as a rule of thumb, it's 10,000 bucks a door that you adjust for. On the carport capacity, it's 5,000 bucks per car spot. And then next you can drop in acreage. And for acreage, I just do $1 per square foot in an acre, right? So an acre is 43,560 square feet. So we're just adjusting at $1 a square foot. All of these numbers can be changed in the future, even if you just did it as a one-off. But again, this is just setting up your default. So when you're doing a CMA, everything populates. We can talk about all of the other scenarios after the fact. All right, so you've got your acres here, followed by your year built. Year built, I don't give it a huge adjustment. And the reason for that is because I'm not normally varying very much between a house. Look, am I going to compare a home that was built in 1948 with a home that was built in 2011? No. So, but would I take a home that was built in 2011 and compare it with something that's like 2005? Sure. But it's not going to be a big adjustment factor, right? We'll get to that in a minute. So that's why the year built, you know, I'll put it in there and give it a value adjustment just the same as an appraiser would, but they don't adjust much value for the year that a property was built. They'll adjust more for the condition than the year, okay? So you've got year built in there, and then the next thing that I put in there now, I didn't, for like 6 or 7 or 8 years, I didn't have to put sold concessions in there. Sold concessions are, just for those of you who may be watching at home eating popcorn who don't know, or those of you in here who may not know, it's like any concession that a seller would pay for on behalf of a buyer. We've seen a lot more seller concessions showing up in the last 18 months, haven't we? So not just in closing costs, but more so, Utah leads the nation, #1 in the nation, in getting sellers to pay for 2-1 buy downs. Did you know that? So the last stat that I looked at was just over 7% of the real estate purchase contracts in the state of Utah had the seller paying a 2-1 buy down on their behalf. That's a concession, all right? That concession actually goes against the value of that property when used as a comparable to another property. So an appraiser sees this property where the seller gave $15,000 to the buyer. It's a concession. It shows up on the MLS as a concession. That now reduces the value of that subject property or that comparable property by $15,000. You all knew that, right? It's okay to say no. All right, just checking. So you can leave it blank because the MLS will fill out that for you. All right. The other thing that I'm going to have you do right now, see, in location showing up in mine and it shouldn't. That's okay. That's okay. We're not perfect. We're just almost perfect. The other thing is, you see these custom factors over here? You can create custom factors. There's one custom factor that I'd really like you to create to start with called condition. All right? And so you create a custom factor here, give it a name, call it condition, right? And then save it. Let me know when you're done. And then give it 10,000. You can change it, but just give it 10,000 for now. So what that does is, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being a model home and 1 being a tear down, it gives you a variety, it'll help adjust the value of a property based upon the property's condition, right? All of you guys are looking, when you're doing your CMAs, you're all looking at photos, aren't you? So you can determine how good a condition a property was in compared to the subject property that you're doing a CMA on. You do that, right? So you have an arbitrary scale of 1 to 10 in your head. And arbitrary is fine. As long as it's your scale, it's fine, right? So if one property, let's say the subject property was an 8, but you looked at one that was like totally remodeled to the hilt, you might give it a 10, right? So that might be a $20,000 adjustment. But I just want to let you know, if I'm using condition in a place like Mill Creek or Sugar House or Olympus Cove, or God knows Park City, am I going to leave that condition at 10,000? Probably not. I'm probably going to bump it up to 25. If I go up to Park City, I might even bump it up to 100,000 for every 1 point differential in condition. Okay? Are we cool with that? I'll explain more of this in a minute when we go through an actual CMA together, but I wanted to make sure that we get this set up. So has everybody got this that wants it? Anybody that I'm waiting for? Yeah, I just leave that as a rule, and again, that can be changed on the spot, and I'll show you in a moment. You can see some other custom factors that I'll use in here. Okay, so like if my property has a swimming pool, like how common are swimming pools in Salt Lake City? Not very common, right? And so here's something that you should know. A swimming pool nowadays will cost you about $120,000, to put an in-ground gunite swimming pool, heated. Okay, it's about 120 grand for an average swimming pool. It's insane. It's not worth 120 grand. Okay, it's not. Somebody buying the house would be like, yeah, I mean, the pool's sweet, kids are gonna like it, but I ain't paying you 120 grand for a swimming pool. I'll just go next door and buy that house. Kids, sorry. So an appraiser is probably gonna give, depending on the swimming pool, probably no more than $40,000 in value. So I wanna just have a swimming pool custom adjustment factor. How many of you guys have done CMAs on properties that had mother-in-laws? Most of us, right? Do most properties in Salt Lake have mother-in-laws? No, and so that's a custom factor. How about solar panels that are paid for? That's another custom factor, right? Outbuilding, like, have any of you guys done a CMA where it had this giant shop on a property that was like a 50 by 50 with, heating and 3-phase power and lifts and all that shit, right? It's an outbuilding. That's when I would use this, right? Appreciation. Okay, how much have homes appreciated in the last year? Okay, that's fine. Let's just go for 3%, right? So what if I'm in an area where I had a hard time finding comparables, but there happened to be a good comparable that was a year old? Now I can pull that comparable in and use this appreciation factor to give it its proper value today. It could be a depreciating market, and you could use it as a depreciation by putting in a negative figure. Again, I'll explain more of this when we actually do the CMA, but I wanted to give you ideas of what I'm using. How about location? Currently, I'm doing a valuation on a property that has nothing between it and the new Davis County corridor. Anybody know what the Davis County corridor? What is it? Just opened up in January. right? Is it kind of like a freeway? Yeah. So does that negatively impact the value of a property? It's probably going to be really hard for me to find a bunch of other properties that have sold in the last 90 to 180 days that are brand new, sitting on a half-acre lot that are against the West Davis corridor, right? So how do I account for that? Location, right? So just for you guys, location, depending on the location of a property on a busy street, it could negatively impact the value of a property between 3 and 10%. What would be 3%? Well, maybe your house sides, 900 East. So you're not pulling in and out of your driveway. And 900 East, while it's, a busy road, is it as busy as 7th East? No. So if I had that same property that was siding, let's say it was on Kensington and it's sided 700 East, is it going to affect the value more than if that same property were on Kensington and 9th East? Yeah, about 5%, right? Now, what if my backyard were, say, I-215? What if I had a big sound wall or something in my backyard on I-215? How much would that maybe affect the value of my property? Probably about 7 to 10% versus exactly the same property that were 2 streets removed from that wall. Am I right? Okay, so that's where these adjustments come in. Now, if you're on a road, here's the rule of thumb. The more yellow lines that road has in it, the more negatively it will impact the value of that property, all right? So look at 9th East. How many yellow lines are on 9th East? You could Google Earth it, but there's 2, right? How many yellow lines are on 700 East if you Google search that? There's 4, but then that doesn't even include the dotted yellows, right? So there's more like 5 or 6 or, that kind of a thing, right? What about a freeway? How many yellow lines do you have in a freeway? A shit ton. Every lane is basically, divided by a yellow line, right? You got 6 over here and you got 6 over there. That's 12. So you see how appraisers will use yellow lines to determine value, and then also remember, does your house back it? Does it side it? Or do you have to pull out of the driveway onto it? Okay? Just.
Alaska, they're yellow, but here in Utah, those are white lines.
Whatever, dude. Whatever.
So when you're giving it
The peanut gallery.
when you're giving it, 7 to 10% reduction in price, are you just factoring in what that value would be if it's a $400,000 house, 10%, 40,000? You just doing a negative 40 in there?
So let me show you how that would go. So I'm going to drop it in, right, in a custom. What I want you guys, I'm going to answer that question in just a minute, but what I want you guys to do, since we've gone through these, I want you to now just kind of save this as your default, right? So just click save. It'll say, do you want to set it as default? You could say Josh's class, what is it, 313. You see that? You can do that. And then you can click here to set as the default template. I want to wait, make sure everybody got that. Something went wrong? Did anybody else go wrong? All you guys went wrong? Huh? So you got all your... No! Suffering succotash. What? So you went up here...
I did click the box that said default, and then it said if something was wrong, click here, and click here, and it brings back the foundation.
Well, that's... Well, look at what you have. You have a printout. Josh has your back. All right? Yeah, it does. Something did go wrong. I don't know why that is. I don't know if the MLS is having a moment. But let me go, I want to answer your question, Spencer, because that's a really good question. So let's go into just some of my saved CMAs. So I'm actually doing one right now. I'm in the process. Let me just show you this one that I was telling you about. So I'm going to view, edit this CMA. So you can see in here, this property had two things going for it, right? It has a mother-in-law apartment, a walkout mother-in-law, so with the separate entrance, right? So a legit-ass mother-in-law apartment. Do you see how much value that I gave that mother-in-law apartment with a walkout, with 9-foot ceilings? 25 grand. Yeah, because appraisers aren't going to automatically give your mother-in-law apartment a hell of a lot of money, especially if it doesn't have a separate entrance. Just want you to know that. This is kind of a higher-end mother-in-law apartment, right? So what do? I say ours has one, and so I'm going to add against any other comparable that has 0. You can see like this one next to it was a sold comp. It had 0. But now let's talk about the location. So notice the location I put at 60,000. How did I come up with that number? The value of the property when the person who purchased it was about $820,000. Right? They actually got a better deal on the lot because it was next to the corridor, right? And if I look at how it affects the value, it's the backyard, so they're not pulling out onto the busy street. One of the nice things about that West Davis corridor, because there's no sound wall there, it kind of drops down. You don't have a ton of sound issue without the sound wall, but you have this beautiful view as a result of it. And so it's not going to affect the value of the property by the full 10%. It's going to be about 7.5%. So if you took 60,000 and divided it by 820,000, you're going to get approximately 7.5%. That's where this number 60 came from. It's based upon the lot that my subject property is on. So what that means is, do you see this property right next to it? It has a 1 in there. What does that mean? That means if I add a 1 to this, it's going to subtract $60,000 worth of value against this property to make it more like mine. What does that mean? It means it's reducing the value of that comp by 60 grand because this is an interior property, right? It doesn't sit on a busy street. It's not siding one, it's not backing one, it's not fronting one. But let me give you an example of one where I used a partial. So do you see how this one is 0.75? So not a full 1. I'm basically taking a $45,000 hit. Why is that? Well, let's look at where this is located. So this is located very close to the freeway. It's going to have some sound influence, but not a ton of it, which is why it's only, I'm only taking 0.25% off of that one, or 1/4 of 1. So notice that these numbers here can be partial numbers. I could make it negative numbers and say, I can make it big time negative numbers. I'm just showing you what it does here. I'm going to leave that one alone so I don't say that. But notice the condition of the property. So the condition I can also give point whatever, right? Is it a 7? Is it a 9? Maybe it's an 8.5. I don't know, right? Well, God, that was fun. So you can give them partial numbers, and it'll just add a partial amount to that. So how many of you guys are like, it's like an 8.5. It's not quite an 8. It's not quite a 9. It's like an 8.5 on a scale of 1 to 10. Anybody ever done that? Well, now you can. You can even say, hell, it's 8.25. By the way, you could say it's an 11. I've done that on properties, right? Where the property was just so fully loaded that it gets more than a 10. Remember, the scale is subjective to your experience, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, where does it land? It's subjective to your experience. The more experienced you are, the better you get at doing these, which is why I always say when you come to a class like this, after the class, you should find an accountability partner. You should do one of these a week and share it with each other and go through the whys behind it. On the Stern team, we used to have Friday CMA day. And so I would do a CMA. The goal would be for the people that were on the team to get their CMA to be within 3% of the value of my CMA. At that point in time, they could qualify to go out and actually do listing appointments. It was part of our listing training process. Like, I don't want you just going out and like coming up with some random value on a home. I want you learning the way that I do it so you can get good at the value before you go out and do it, right? So how are you guys going to do that? Find a freaking accountability partner in here and practice. What did I say last week? Anybody come to the class last week? All right, what was my thought about what you guys had learned last week on absorption reports? What did I? Okay, perfect. Or find an accountability partner and do just one zip code a week, you know, or something like that, right? Did anybody find an accountability buddy? Of course, we got two. Excellent, love it. Good. So anyway, I wanted to answer that question for you. Does that help?
Yeah.
All right. Peanut Gallery?
Legit question.
Okay.
Are you using the CMA to prove yourself the value or to prove your client?
Both. So if you were in last week's class, you would understand the first thing that I do before I do a CMA is what? Absorption reports, right? So I don't even go looking for value until I understand what the market's doing in any given area, right? So I've done that for the subject property that we're going to do it on today, right? So that's the first thing that I'm doing for me. I'm doing that for me. Will I share it with the seller? Most likely, right? Because sellers, I find the more data I provide to a seller, the better decision they make. And number two, how many people do you know that are coming to the table with something as prepared as absorption reports, followed by CMAs with custom adjustment factors? How many people are showing up like that? Not very many, because we're not trained to. You know, so we're going to go to the, you know, the easiest thing possible is let's make something look really good when we get there, right? So I'll use the cloud CMA because it looks really good. But the cloud CMA isn't very accurate. It's hard to explain to a seller why I created that. It's easy for me to tell a seller why I've created this and how those adjustments are made from one property to the next. And so I use it for both. I use it for me to help with value, and I use it for them. Now, there are definitely times, is there anybody in here that has gone to a listing appointment without a CMA? Right. And why would you do that? Because I don't have enough information to know what this property is going to look like. I'll run a CMA for me, but I won't run a CMA for them. Why? Because I don't want to be stamped with the CMA. You know what's happened to me? I have done this, where I went to the property and I'm like, oh, damn. My CMA is either like way high or way low to where, thank God, it's bound in a separate book, you know, where I can just be like, yeah, we're not breaking that out. We're just going to talk. And then now I'm doing Spencer's two-step. I hate two steps. Why? Because somebody like Spencer, who's damn good at listing, might come in between me and getting to the next step. You know what I mean? So I prefer to do it right out of the gate. But there are definitely times where I'm going to a listing appointment with no CMA at all, right? Because I just don't know. I'll do a CMA for me to give me an idea of kind of what my value is going to be, but I might not show up there because I just don't have enough information. What was your thought, Justin?
Well, what happens when you do a CMA and it comes in at this price, and you're just looking at comps, what's available, what's under contract, what's sold, and you're like, dude, this is the price. And you often have two different steps you're trying to figure out. And then you're like, no, CMA says this.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that's the outcome.
Yeah, it doesn't. So if you're uncertain of yourself, you don't have to bring a CMA, you know, to an appointment. But just so you know, I'll always bring the CMAs, but I always bring the full printout with the photos so we can go through each one of them. And I might say, you know, those other two probably aren't the best comps, but this one is just like your house. That's pretty good, you know. So let's go through this though, because I really want you guys understanding like how to actually do the CMA itself and some of the things that we're going to look at. So when we were in the Great Recession, I had the blessing of being able to do countless CMAs, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many listing appointments I went on where I didn't get the listing. Why? Because values were going down and people owed more than they could sell it for, so they were just not moving, right? But there was something else that happened, and that was the bank started hiring me to do what they call BPOs, broker price opinions, for their properties, right? So I was doing so many of these, but I had to do them under certain guidelines. They were the same guidelines that appraisers were having to use, so I got very good at doing values during the Great Recession. You know, I got really good at watching the values plummet during the Great Recession. I got really good at delivering bad news to a lot of sellers that I stayed in touch with, and then eventually we sold. So let's actually go through and do one. So it's because you guys have the MLS up in front of you, let's go ahead and pull up this previous MLS number in the MLS. You can also do it by property search. So the very first thing that I do when I go to doing a CMA is I'll look to see if this is a property that's ever been listed before, right? And normally, like if I'm setting an appointment, I'm close to a computer, I can do this at the same time as I'm talking to somebody. You could too, right? I mean, you've done enough of these where it's like, I'm just talking to you, we're having a conversation, and I'm putting in your property address to see if there's an old MLS, and then I go, oh my gosh, there is, and I go to the most recent one, which usually has the biggest number, pulling it up. And I might start asking questions about the property, right? So we'll get into that. But this is the old MLS. This is the property that we're going to do a CMA on together. Property that we're doing the CMA on. What am I reading out loud?
The MLS number?
Oh, 327293. Yep, 327293. And again, it's hard to follow along on this because the picture got put there, but that's all right. We'll get there. You have all the rules printed out for you. That's the good news, right? So the very first thing I'm going to do, now, not all properties have an MLS number, right?
Right.
Okay. So if I'm on the horn with somebody and there's no MLS number, I have no knowledge of this property really at all. I can go to the tax records, but how often does the tax records tell you how many bedrooms or bathrooms are in a basement? Here? Never, really. Almost never, okay? And why is that? Because most people who finish their basement didn't pull a permit to finish the damn basement, all right? That's just a fact, Jack. Get over it. It is what it is. All right, so they don't have all the data, right? So I now have to ask these questions, and I put them on there. Very first thing I like to ask, even whether it has an MLS number or not, is what are the major upgrades that you've made to the property since you've owned it? Well, what if they've owned it for 40 years? All right, what are the major upgrades that you've made to the property in the last 5 to 10 years? And let them tell you. And they'll tell you things like paint, that's not a major upgrade. Flooring, not a major upgrade. I've replaced the hot water heater, not a major upgrade. I'll take notes on it, but none of those are major upgrades, right? Upgrades might be additions or a new bathroom or a remodeled kitchen, you know, things that actually will change the value of the property. All right, so I'll ask those things, write it down again. I need to know because I want to compare apples with apples when I'm looking at the CMA, okay? So the other thing I want to know is information about the basement, you know, so is the basement finished? Yes, it is. What rooms are finished in the basement? I'll say, for instance, do you have a bedroom? Yeah, I have 2 bedrooms. Great. Do you have a bathroom? Yes. Does it have a shower and a tub, or is it just a shower? It's just a shower. Okay. 3/4 bath, right? So I'm taking those notes, you know, as I'm talking to them. We can't find that out any other way. You're going to have to ask those questions before you start pulling comps to make sure that you're pulling apples to apples, which again, we'll talk about, right? Now, something else that I want you guys to do is always verify the square footage. This is a common mistake that we make as agents is we don't inspect what we expect. Granted, Kelly probably does, but I'm not a detail-oriented guy. You know what I mean? Like I just face value, 1,988 square feet, good to go, right? But let's take a look at something here. If I go and click on the tax ID number, it's gonna bring me to the details about the property, right? It's gonna show me my base area, and then it's gonna show me my basement area. The base area is kind of like your main floor, right? Do those match up? So we're at 998 and 788. Do those match up? You can see the main floor here, you know, they're giving an extra 200 and something square feet. That's not nothing in Mill Creek, is it? 200 square feet is like kind of valuable, right? So at that point, I've got a discrepancy. I've got a discrepancy between what the tax records show and what the reality is. So what do? I'm gonna ask the person on the phone, hey, by the way, the old MLS showed this square footage, the county shows this square footage. Do you have an appraisal that was done on the property that I can just look at the square footage? Yeah. Will you send it over to me? A lot of people will have it digitally, right? They save those things digitally. Great, well, you send it over. I just want to look and verify the square footage that the appraiser had because the appraiser actually measured it, all right? So that's part of the reason why I chose this one as a subject property is to demonstrate to you guys that it's not uncommon that your old MLS and your county records aren't going to have the same square footage. So that's important for us to know. Sometimes you can go to like a parcel ID in the county links and you get some more additional information about the property, right? I could just take the parcel ID number and see how this thing is broken down. Oh, it loaded it up for me. You can see the above grade square footage here is 998 square feet. I didn't mean to click on that. You can get some additional information that you might not be able to otherwise get. If it had a second floor, it would probably tell you what the second floor is versus the main floor. That's all useful to know. All right, so that's what those county links would be good for. All right, so let's go back to what we're walking through here. Oh, one of the things I like to do before I ever do my comp search is a Google search of the property. I like to look at the Google map here. What am I looking for? Functional obsolescence. Does anybody know what functional obsolescence is in here by raise of hand? It's something that affects the value of the property that makes it unlike other properties. So for instance, if I were backing a busy street, that would be functional obsolescence. If I were a single family home right next to a 50-unit apartment complex, that's functional obsolescence, right? That same home one street in isn't sitting next to the apartment, so it's not like, it's something that the seller can't control, but will affect the value of the property. I want to know that stuff ahead of time. So that's why I do like a Google search, and I'll just take a look at it and I'll be like, all right, like what's going on with this property? Oh, not much. Oh, look at that. It backs the Grant State Park, right? Okay, I don't know what that is. State Park. It's a state park. Probably has softball fields, grass, I don't know. Anyway, that's not a negative. But if it was sitting next to a gas station, what if it were right next to a grocery store? Do you think the lights in the parking lot might affect, somebody's desire to want to live in that particular property? That's what causes functional obsolescence. All right, so I just want to make sure you understand before we ever even look at comps, just do a Google search. And by the way, if a property was a rental property at some point in time, but it had no MLS history, Zillow will show up and it'll hold on to the pictures of when they were trying to market it for rent. You get a good idea of what the condition of the property is. You might see some interior photos, right? So if I go back to this property here, let's see if a Zillow has 1116. Right here? That's the wrong one. But maybe I go into like Trulia because I think Zillow owns Trulia. I'm just going to click on it. And yeah, I mean, there's some like older photos. I don't know if they're current, but kind of gives me an idea of what the condition of a property would be. If I've never been to it, it's helpful, right? So that's one of the reasons why I like to Google search, all right? Now let's talk about when we're actually pulling comparables, what are we looking for? What an appraiser is going to look for? The first rule of thumb that you guys need to know is an appraiser is going to choose the most recent like comparables. So generally when I'm setting up a search, I don't look past 90 days. Now sometimes I'm in a very unique area where I didn't find any good comps within 90 days. I might go back 180. I've given you an example where I've gone back 2 years, 3 years, right? I got this luxury property that backs a river. Like, where are you going to find those? Maybe so. Like, and that's where I might throw that appreciation custom adjustment factor into there. Hey, homes have appreciated X amount in this period of time. This home was on the river. It's a luxury property just like yours. It sold however many years ago, but I can now use the appreciation factor to make it more like your property. That's why I would do that. But as a rule, the more recent the comparable, the more likely it is, as long as the appraiser is comparing apples with apples, the appraiser is going to use that comparable, the closest one, right? Has anybody in the room ever tried to dispute appraised values with the appraiser? Okay, cool. All right, so I have too, a lot. And when I first started doing it, I was doing it all wrong. I'd be like sending over two-story, my subject properties like a Rambler, but I'm sending over like two-story homes. You know, I'm like, same square footage, but one's a two-story, one's a Rambler. What does the appraiser have to say about that? Yeah, they're like, that's a joke. You know, what happens when I send properties over that are more than maybe 10% bigger? The appraiser is going to be like, why would I choose that when I have 3 that are within 10% of your property? So that's another rule that you have to understand. In general, the appraiser's looking at the property's GLA, gross living area. So they put more weight on above ground square footage than they do on below ground square footage, right? So usually they're trying to get within about 10% GLA, gross living area, above ground, okay? Usually they're looking at homes that are within about 10 years of the age of the home that your subject property is, all right? So again, that egregious example, would you compare a 2000 home with a home built in 1911? No, you wouldn't, and neither would an appraiser, right? They also look at the style of home, so make sure, you know, when you're comparing a property, if it's a bungalow home, do you want to compare it with Victorian style homes? Absolutely not. Right, good answer. And you probably wouldn't compare, you know, a split level with a Rambler out in West Valley, would you? Would you do that? No. So what your goal is to use the same style of property first. Now, if an appraiser can't find a minimum of 3 like properties, they'll start to bend some of their rules. Maybe they did find a split level that was the same square footage as your Rambler. Maybe they used it because that's all they had, right? Maybe they traveled a little bit farther outside of the area. Maybe they went back more than 90 days. Maybe appraisers can, by the way, go back up to 6 months. They don't have to. They usually won't, but they can. So maybe they go a little bit back farther in time. So I'm just telling you how an appraiser thinks on this stuff, because ultimately, the valuation that you come up with, if you sell the property's going to have to, if somebody's getting a loan, the property's going to have to what? Appraise for the price. And so that also helps me when I have pricing conversations where Justin thinks that the house is worth 1.25 million, but my comps are showing that the value is a million, and I've pulled solid frickin' comps. I have to let Justin know, you know, while I don't disagree, this is a beautiful property, whoever purchases this property, they're going to have to get a loan as well. And the appraiser is going to be using these same comparables in the value of your home. Well, I disagree with that. Well, no problem. Here's the deal. I'm happy to pay for an appraiser for you. You'll just reimburse me at closing. And you can choose to spend the $700 to have an appraiser come in and tell you that it's worth $1 million, or you can take my word on it. Your choice. Have anybody ever done that? Justin has. You've done that too? Good. Yeah, so I mean, that's just a good way to handle some of these pricing objections that you get. Be like, I'll be happy to pay up front for the appraisal if you disagree. So, all right. So what are some ideal comps? Okay, we talked about the ideal comps. Okay, so let's go to this property search. I think I've got it set up here. I've saved it. No, that's not it. Save searches. One of the rules that you guys should have in place for yourself is save your comp searches. If you take the listing and you're servicing a listing every single week, you like to know what's become available, gone under contract, or sold, don't you, in the last 7 days? You like to share that information with your seller, right, by email, okay? So if you go through the trouble of doing a CMA for a potential client, assume the client's gonna be yours and save the search as property address comp search, right? Easy to do. Just save it. And that way you can go into the criteria anytime that you want. Most of it's already going to be laid out. You just can go in here and start, you know, messing with a few things. So first thing I've done is, let's talk about the area. So this property, do you have the subject property? You know you can open up a new tab on this, right? So I can work with multiple tabs if I want to. You all knew that, right? Okay, cool. They didn't used to have that feature, and what a pain in the ass it was to do this type of work, you know? Anyway, you got the property up. We already know the square footage is wrong. We'll make that adjustment in a few. but we want to look at what's, where would people be looking for a property? If they're looking at this to purchase this property, where else would they be looking, generally speaking? Yeah, from like 7th East, that's a good border. They're probably not looking west of 7th East, right? Because that 7th East in Salt Lake County tends to be a bit of a value guideline, right? Values will drop a little bit the further west you go, just like they go up, a little bit the further east you go. So I'm probably going to stick with, not going west of 7th East. How far east should I go for a property like this? Well, the property itself is between 11th and 13th. See, I wouldn't even go up to 23rd for comps unless I had to, because 1300 itself is kind of a value divide. So if anything, I might go like 1500 east. That's arbitrary, but that picks up any of these properties that are kind of bordering 1300, that are fairly close, but not all the way up into this area, because your values are going to go up as you go up here. All right. Now, what about north and south? This property's at 3420 south. So how far north can I go and still be kind of within the realm of realistic? 2700 is the right answer. 27th to 39th is the right answer. That really is the right answer. I could push it out to 45th. There's not much of a difference, but that's the first window I want to look at, is between 7th and arbitrarily 1500 east, because I'm just going to do a little grid search, and then from 2701 south, because I don't want to pull it on a busy street, so I might as well just do it like that, out to 3899 south. Do you see what I'm doing? Because I just don't want to deal with any houses on busy streets unless my house were on a busy street. Now, if my house were on a busy street, I might search from, let's say the house was on 900 east, in the same about approximate south. I'm going to search between, let's say 2700 south and 4500 south, but I'm going to go from 7th east to 7th east. Then I'm going to go from 9th east to 9th east, from 11th east to 11th east, from 13th east to 13th east. And after I'm done, I'll reset my borders from 700 east up to 1300 east, but now I'm going to go from 2700 south to 2700 south, from 3300 south to 3300 south. Do you see what I'm doing? What will end up happening is only the properties that are on busy roads will show up in a search like that. I realize that might be a little bit confusing, but that's how I find homes that are on busy streets. So in this case, though, you guys nailed it. That's exactly the parameters that I want to put in. So let's just make sure I'm looking at single-family homes that have sold within the last 90 days, right? And I'm in the southeast quadrant of Salt Lake, and I've got 2700 south, I'm going to put that in, to 3900 south, and then 900 east. Actually, we can go from 700 east, that's fine, out to 1500 east. Now, if I can't find enough comps, I can always broaden my area. But look at what's happened already. I'm like, oh my God, 29, that's way too many. How many do you need to do an appraisal? 3. So you can't go less than 3, and I don't recommend going more than, say, 5, right? I just don't. Because then you start to vary too much, and there's just too much, So I'm just going for the best ones. Now, what's our square footage total? It's probably closer to 1766, not 1988, because we already know that the square footage was wrong on this. So 1766 total square feet. So I don't really want to see anything bigger than 2,000, and I really don't want to look at anything lower than 1,500. So what am I left with? 9. That's pretty good to start, right? Should we take a look at them? So again, look at our property here. We know, what would you say the condition is? I'm just going to say it's an 8, right? I'm just going to throw it out. It's an 8. So we'll look at some of the other ones and make sure we're not looking at dumps, and we're not going to want to look at anything that was brand new or totally remodeled, right? The other thing that we're looking at is a year built style of home. I don't want to look at 2 stories if I don't have to. So let's just take a look and see what we have here. I don't know. I haven't chosen my comps yet, but if you look at the bottom, oh, by the way, I did do the absorption report here. Should I tell you what the results are of that before we start doing value? Because this is what I would do for myself, which I did do. I just didn't do it in front of you, but I did write it down for you. So here's the deal. Doing that same search that, that both Sean and Spencer recommended, that's where the area is that I'm looking at the absorption report. Single family homes, my macro area might be a little bit broader than that, but here's my micro area. Only 25 homes listed for sale in that area. 18 of them sold in the last 30 days. That's a 1.4 month supply. 8 homes came on the market, 7 went under contract. It's definitely a seller's market there, right? But that's only 25 properties. That's why I went out and did more of a macro area, right? So where I expanded my search all the way up to 2300 East, but I went lower than 700 East, and I went from 2100 South all the way out to 6600 South. And the reason why I did this is because I wanted to look at some price bracketing here. I wanted to get an idea of, do we have a tale of two markets? Do I have a certain price range that's not moving like we discovered last week, right? I want to know that right now, like before I got to the appointment, what I'm up against, right? So I price bracketed it. This home will probably fall in this price bracket. So there are 59 homes that are available in that big area. 30 sold in the last 30 days. It's a 2-month supply. 16 came on the market. 22 moved into pending status. Definitely a seller's market in that price range. Now I know. Now I know. That helps me with valuation, helps me with pricing conversations, which we'll get into. So there are 9 that I had that were sold. So if I view those 9, let's just look at a full report of them. I've got, by the way, let me go back really quick. Generally, you can change the way that these are sorted by clicking on MLS numbers. So this will show up the oldest first to the newest last, or I can do it the other way, newest first to oldest last. I generally like to go by list price, right? Why was something $240,000 difference here, right? And I might want to look real closely at those right now. Here's a rule of thumb. Usually if I drop a low comp, I'm also going to drop a what? Right. That's almost always my rule. If I drop a low comp, I better get rid of a high comp so I can balance things out. So I want to know though, like, why did this thing sell for so much more than anything else? I can look at it fairly quickly. It's 4-bed, 2 baths. So far, it doesn't look all that different, right? Look at that thing, man. It was listed at $574, sold for $680. I mean, that's just nuts. I'm going to look at the pictures of the property and go, what the hell happened to this? You know? I mean, it's nice. I don't know if it's that nice. I mean, it's like, I don't know. Yeah, it's nice. It may have come with a Porsche. I don't know. I mean, oh, look at the gazebo in Hato. I mean, that doesn't really account for it. Oh, look at that amazing 1-car garage. Probably doesn't account for it. I mean, that's pretty random. So unless I had a home that was fully remodeled, why would I want to use this as a comparable? I have 9 to choose from. I definitely don't. So it's easy for me to say, well, I'm definitely going to drop that. But let me take a look at this one real quick. Like, why did this one sell for so low? Well, we know. The address, it's on 700 East. So it could be nice, but it's on 700 East, and ours is not. So that now I want to start looking what other properties are on busy streets. Well, here's one on 9th East. Ours is not. Should get rid of that. Here's another one on 9th East. Probably should get rid of that. How are we doing so far? We understanding kind of how this works? Now I'm left with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's about the right amount for me, you know? So now I'm going to just look at a full report, because the next thing I want to do is I want to get an idea of what these properties look like. This one's pretty plain Jane up front. Has a 2-car garage lean-to. What are those? Who's parking their car in that? Curious. Anybody? Anybody done listing appointments out in Sugar House where they said they had a 2-car garage and you went out there and you're like, oh boy. Probably not valued like a normal 2-car garage, is it? So this one has a 2-car garage, which is great, but honestly, it has a 2-car lean-to. That's what I call them. So I look at the property. It's a pretty small property. It's pretty boxy. You can see the kitchen's not really updated. I mean, the condition of the property. What would you give it? If I gave the other one that we looked at an 8, what would you give this one, a 6? That's fair. That's fair. And that's probably what I would do as well. It is, so what Justin just said is the next thing that I want to look at, and that is, what's my gross living area, right? So again, that's above ground square footage. And remember, this one says it's 1,200, but we know it's just rounded down to 1,000. That's about what it is 1,000. It's 998, okay? But 1,000 square feet. Well, 1,000 square feet versus 770, is that more than a 10% differential? a lot more, right? So this house is frankly just too small for me to feel comfortable using. And granted, I can remove it from here, and I still have how many left? 4, okay? So here's another one, and this is kind of an interesting looking deal, isn't it? What do they got there up front of this property? What the hell is that? I mean, this house is sweet. Look at that, super nice. Weird looking. Any pictures of that room that's downstairs? Well, at least the dead bodies are getting light, you know. But yeah, that's. I mean, I can't actually ever say that I've seen that. So, I don't know. It's not my favorite comp. Again, I look at that GLA, but I might keep it for a minute. We'll just hold on to it. It's a maybe. It's not a hell no. All right. But here's one. Look at that. Look at this. Ridgedale. How about that? What is somebody looking at where Rosie Bain is now? Right. Yeah. Some people move and they move and they move and they never solve their internal problems. Yeah, but we're looking at the details of property, not to where the agent went. I know, it caught mine too. So this one I like, right? Because now I've got something that's going to be a little bit more similar with that above grade square footage. I want to, you know, just kind of generally peruse that condition. Say it's pretty nice, you know. How nice? Oh God, remodeled kitchen, that's going to bump you up a bit, right? Hardwood floor, a remodeled bathroom, that's going to bump you up, and a dated basement. Although that's hot. I mean, that's hot, right? Like that carpet, you can't buy that carpet anymore. You can't even buy solid pine siding. Did you know that? Like, you just can't buy it. You know. Anyway, I would probably give it like an 8.5. You know, because, and it's not, but you know, the one that the comparable property probably isn't either. You know what I mean? So you just have to make assumptions. It's on the same street. It's built in the same era, probably done by the same building. There are only 3 house designs that are in this whole neighborhood anyway, unless somebody's modified them. So it's only because I know the neighborhood Clayton had mentioned was at your house. It was my house. It is my house. I do own that house. It's a rental property. That's why we're doing it. Not because I don't know the value, but because I know things about it that help me train you. Like when the square footage is off, I know that. You don't, but I do. All right. Back to Lake Street again. This is a property which Justin might point out. I don't like the GLA square footage on that one so much. Not a fan of it. But if I get rid of it, now I'm down to low amounts of properties, right? So I might have 3 left if I get rid of this one. Is that true? How many are left? Yes. So there's 3. 2 of them I like, 2 of them I don't. Now, if I was unhappy with this, I might go back to this search here. Let's just go back to this search, and I might pull up a full search. What was our biggest problem that we were having? I was having a hard time finding homes that had the same main level square footage as mine. So maybe I don't want to look at anything that, let's say, is lower than 850 and not anything bigger than, say, 1200. I could also go 800. You know, 800 to 1200, right? And I've got 6 that show up there, but we've already looked at a couple of those. So maybe what I do is I go back 120 days. Do you see what I'm doing here? Just adding a couple of things. So now I'm back to 9 properties. And so now we can go back and look at some of them that are going to be a little bit more like it. I already know I like these 2. They're in the same neighborhood, right? This one's actually in the same neighborhood as well, but it's way high for a price. Like, I don't understand why that is. Probably got everything in it, all the bells and whistles, modified floor plan. I really don't know, but I don't like. Yeah, I mean, it's barely above, right? So it's not my favorite just because of how high it is. If I drop the high, I drop the low. I already know I'm not looking at that low. We've already dropped this high, got to drop that low. So now I'm left with maybe these 3 to look at, right? Do I like this one? No, it's on 9th East. We're not looking at 9th East, right? This one's on 10th East, but 10th East is not a busy street. Do I like it? Yeah, it's pretty close. Year built, you know, yeah, I probably do like it. Probably would keep that one. And then I look at this one again, and I'm just like, that's so weird. I don't have to keep it, but I'm going to keep it because if I don't, we're gonna run out of time, because I could do this shit forever. And I don't wanna do that. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna just take those 4 properties right now. We're gonna then, actually, let me go back real quick. Let me go back one. So what did I say? I wanna save my search, right? So before I even look at the comps, basically, I like my search. So updated, Ridgedale. Good enough, saved it. Go back to the properties that I like. Not hard to do. Hopefully you guys are all following along at home. If you have questions, save them because I can't hear you. I didn't like Ninth East. I like this one, I like this one, and I liked that one. All right. So now we're gonna just select those properties. We've got 4 of them. I'm gonna create my CMA report. I'm gonna show you something else, but sometimes you can add in the property. Let's say it doesn't have an old MLS number, but I have the tax ID number, right? So watch what happens when I pull in the by tax ID number, which you have the option of doing. Might take a second for it to think. Okay, so it's got the address right, but here's one thing I know. The bathrooms are now wrong, all right? What about acreage? Oh, it's got 170 acres? Sick, but that's wrong, you know? Look at the adjustment, you know? Now these houses are worth like 7.8 million, right? So do you see what happens when you pull in from parcel ID? It messes up your basement. It doesn't know what's finished in the basement. It screws up it doesn't know if you have a garage or a carport. It screws up your lots every single time, right? It doesn't really show me my main level square footage versus my basement square footage. And look, it just lumps them all into one total square footage, which we already know is not accurate. That square footage is not accurate. So do you see why I like to not use the the parcel ID number? I just wanted to demonstrate that for you. Now in this case, we have an old MLS number, but we know that the square footage is wrong on it. So, oops, let me just go back to my CMA report and we'll populate the subject data with the MLS number. It's got the address right, but it's got my square footage wrong. We know from looking on the county, this is 998. I actually know that that's true because I have an appraisal for this property, right, years ago. So I know that that's true. And I was the one that actually fixed it with the county. So if the county has it wrong and the appraisal comes back, like this is how I was able to negotiate such a great price for this property with the bank. This is a short sale before short sales were a thing, is because the square footage was off by more than 200. So I went right back to the bank and said, here's the deal. The square footage is inaccurate. And they're like, okay, we'll adjust it by X. I got a really good deal on this property. It was $150,000, I think. Oh, awesome. Of course, it was like 1923 when I bought it, but anyway, so I can fix that. Now, if there are things that are wrong, how many of you guys have seen a property that was 3-bed, 2-bath, and a 2-car garage, but it didn't say it had a 2-car garage, but you could see the picture of the friggin' garage right on there? Input error. You ever seen that? That's how I used to buy these good deals. Input errors, right? And when I'm sitting with clients and they're like, no, it needs to have a two-car garage, I'll be like, all right, cool. I'll only send them properties that have 2-car garages, but when I set up my search for myself, I don't do that. Do you know why? Because human beings input this stuff into the MLS, and human beings quite often miss the little thing that says 2. Why? Because we are real estate agents, not detail-oriented like Kelly. That's why everybody needs a Kelly in their family, right? So this happens. Have you guys put information into an MLS and it wasn't right, and you're like, oh shit, I got to go back and change that? Okay, cool. Like your clients noticed it, you went and made the change. That's all I'm saying. So if that ever happens and you see a comp here and it in fact did have a garage, you can go to edit comp mode. And you see how all of these turned yellow? So I can manually make adjustments. Now this one had a 2-car garage, it just said it didn't. I can manually make those adjustments, all right? but I'm not going to. I'm just going to leave it alone for right now and get out of the edit comp mode. I just wanted to demonstrate because I probably used this program for 12 years before I clicked that button. And I was like, oh, damn, I can edit those, sweet. So now I can make the price what I really want to make it. Not what I did, but you know what I'm saying. All right, so this one also shows as 3 full bathrooms. It's 1 full bath and 1 3/4 bath. So I just want to make sure I get the data right on mine before I move on. Now, in Mill Creek, you know, I'm going to say is probably adjusting at probably closer to $20,000 or maybe even $25,000 per point in terms of condition, right? You don't remodel homes. Homes in Mill Creek, that's why you saw the spread between the low and the high was like 300,000, right? It's because you can do a lot to up the value of a home in Mill Creek. Could you do that in West Valley? Could you do that in Magna? Could you take 2 homes that are basically the same and make them sell for $300,000 different? The answer is no, you can't. But you can in Mill Creek, you can in Sugar House, you can up in Olympus Cove. So those higher price per square foot kind of areas, you see those bigger shifts, right? Because people are willing to pay more of a premium for a nicer home up there. So in this case, do you see how my condition says 10,000? I can change it right now to 25,000 if I want. By the way, if a property really did have a 2-car garage in this area, is that hard to find? So do you think it's worth more than $10,000 a door for a property that would have an actual 2-car garage versus one that didn't? Yeah. So I'm probably going to change that to be $20,000 a door, right? So an actual 2-car garage that's sweet is $40,000 of value versus what our subject property has, which is no garage. Does that make sense? Do you see how I can adjust these numbers if I need to based upon the area? And I'll do that very quickly before I start going through, because the next thing I have to do is, what condition is our property in? 8. I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe it's a 7.5 to you, but I'm just going to use my scale and we'll see what happens, right? All right, so first thing I have to do is I've got to look at the pictures of the property because I need to get the condition of these homes, right? So, I don't know, it's probably, I do this very quickly, sorry guys, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. I don't know, it's probably close to an 8, 7.5, 8, somewhere in that ballpark, right? I don't have to be precise, I could say, yeah, you know, if I said 7.5 and 8 to 8, I'm just going to give it 7 3/4, all right? So it's going to make that adjustment on it. Go to the next one. And this one, we did look at the pictures already. It was actually pretty nice. I think nicer than mine. Look at that kitchen. I mean, that's backsplash for days. I expect a pot filler, though, if you're going to have a backsplash like that. Oh, look at the hood there. Ooh, that's real nice. Yeah, they spent some money on it. Like, none of that stuff's cheap. Look at the bathroom. Same thing. Pretty nice. So, I mean, in comparison with mine, I would probably give this like a 9. All right. And I got to get to the one that had the 2-car garage because I need to adjust that because there ain't no way in hell I'm going to give that 2 cars worth of garage value. All right. But this one's, let's see the condition of this guy. Has the open floor plan, very hard to find, right? Somebody removed a wall and opened up a floor plan. That automatically is going to give them a bump in condition, even if they didn't do a lot of other things. But the kitchen's totally redone. Gas range, nice hood. Pretty basic, but really quite nice, you know. It just doesn't photograph well, which is why you guys should never, you know, see, I think this is all virtual staging in there, maybe. I don't know. Because it looks like it's an empty house for the most part, doesn't it? Yeah, I don't know. But you definitely would want to have some virtual staging. I don't like empty rooms in my photographs. Buyers don't either. Why? Because they lack imagination, you know. I mean, why would you throw this photo, seriously, why would you put that in a photo tour? Just don't include it. Just remove it. It's so much better, right? Because people are like, oh, that's super sweet. And then they get here and they're like, what the fuck? What is that? You know? I don't know. And then, of course, you got to include that super sweet utility room, right? Why would you do that? Seriously, why would you put that photo in there? Anyway, just so you know, photographers may do that naturally because they're like, here's all the photos. You guys should be like, less is more, man. Like, go and choose the photos that you want to represent that property. I don't want my utility room representing my property. Just saying. All right, but overall, conditions probably a 9. And then last one in here is this guy in Lorraine. And, ooh, wow, that's some personal. Go on and get your Christmas on in there. I mean, if it were my property, I might have told my client that we're painting all the base and case white and the walls like some sort of neutral color. Maybe, I don't know. But either way, I mean, it's pretty nice. It's just very personalized. Look at that bathroom. It's got the aluminum tiles on the ceiling. That is sexy. Like if that doesn't get you a girlfriend or boyfriend, I don't know what will. And just so you know, like if this were an expired listing, I would probably be taking these photos with me and tell the seller everything I would have them do differently to appeal to more buyers and why, okay? This is visual clutter, all right? We don't even need those pictures in there to get people into the home. We just don't need them. You can put them in there if you want, but if I was gonna have photos there, I'd probably have a piece of furniture removed and all the crap on the walls and the ceiling removed, right? And by the way, how do dead plants photograph, like fake plants? Do they photograph awesome? No, they don't. So take them down. They don't. They look like crap. And by the way, every flat surface should be cleared of everything other than decorative items. Are books decorative items? Maybe if it were like the Harry Potter set or your Encyclopedia Britannica, right? But if it's every book by every author from every publisher known to man, it's just visual noise. Clean it. Get rid of it. Pack it. You're moving. Just pack it. Do it now. All right? Sweet ass basement. Sweet ass basement. Like I'm picking on them, right? The house did sell, granted, but I'm picking on these guys. So you can see they do have, it looks like an on-demand hot water heater and a pretty nice HVAC system too. That's a high efficiency. So that's worth paying attention to. They've got a good garage. Oh, and speaking of garages, didn't the one before this have that lame 2-car garage? One of them did. Maybe it's this one. Do you remember the one picture we looked at that had that? Oh, I took it out. Okay.
I think they added those pictures so people knew what they were walking into versus you walk in and you're surprised. Seriously, versus walking in or realizing like an exterior, there's a cell phone tower or something.
Do you think that those cluttery pictures are a good representation of the house as a whole? Not really. It probably isn't. So now I don't want to include them in there because people are judgy McJudgensteins. You know what they do? They judge. The first bite you take is with your eyeballs, right? If it doesn't look good, it's probably not going to taste very good. And so you look at something like that, what was well, they got over list price on it, But no, that would not be my preference. I mean, I'm kind of more like, let's focus on the main rooms and the other rooms don't really matter. And if they're super cluttery, if we're going to photograph it, I'm telling my client, like, we got to deal with it now before the photos are done. You do the same thing, right?
You're going to be cluttered like if you're doing an exterior shot.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, 6, 8, 10 photos. Yeah, I mean, it works, right? I haven't had a problem with it. It's easier to sell the house in person than it is in 2 dimensions. Buyers have no imagination. This is why we pay money to have virtual staging done for empty property. You do, don't you? I mean, I do, right? It costs more money, but it gets more people in the door because buyers lack imagination. So if it just looks like an empty house, it could be the nicest house on the planet, but it's really hard to like have any perspective on anything, So for the same reason, if they're shitty pictures, like why would I have them take a picture of a pantry? How many pantries have you seen? Unless the pantry is sweet, why would I have them include a picture of a pantry? How about your average bedroom closet? How many interior closet pictures have you seen? Why? What is it doing to help sell the house? Unless it's something special, why would I have a photo of it, right? But if I'm trying to get an accurate representation of the house, I'm not going to try to hide certain things. But if that's my seller, I'm going to have them do everything different. I'm going to tell them, you're moving, start packing. Well, we didn't sell last time. I'm telling you, you're moving, and it's easier to pack now than it is later. And by the way, let's talk about these photos.
Like all of that strategy of trip photography, right? You got to get into the door first.
Yes.
And it's the seller's job to make sure the house is
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we'll do, and you guys, like, if people in here haven't given a lot of like staging advice and that, like one of these classes I'm gonna do, I think it's in a couple more weeks, it is gonna be just on staging and things like that. We're just gonna talk through all of these things so you have a better idea of how to talk with clients. Some of you guys that are in here are uber experienced, but I can't assume that everybody that comes into this room is gonna be super experienced, and so I wanna teach people the things that you need to pay attention to. This would be a great photo to hold on to, right, of why a property didn't sell. You know, when you do a seller seminar, anybody ever do like a Zoom like seller seminar? How to sell a home in a changing market, right? What I'll do, basically all I'm doing on a seller seminar is my listing presentation. You get it? But I'm showing them what we don't do. Like I'll show them exterior photos that we wouldn't do versus exterior photos that we would do and why. And then I'll show them interior photos and the order of interior photos that we wouldn't do versus the interior photos that we would do and why, right? So it makes for a great seller presentation, you know, or seller seminar, right? Those are good to have if you haven't done those. So where's my value coming at? 543? Now, we have a 1.4 month supply of homes on the market in this area, right? If I were going to suggest a list price for this seller, anybody have a good idea of where I would list this home? Sean, 550, did you say? Why would you choose 550?
Because we're still at 1.4 months inventory, so you're, based on the numbers, theoretically overpriced a little bit, but because of lack of inventory, you're still going to like the demand pop out.
So smart. So what he's saying is I can price ahead of the market because the demand is there, right? You only have 1.4 month supply. That's totally a seller's market. $7,000, you know, difference between 443 and 550, or 543 and 550. Yeah, no problem. We're in the ballpark. What I had mentioned before is you can usually go up to around 3% above what your valuation is going to be, as long as it's an accurate valuation, and get away with it. But there's one more reason I would tell a seller to be at 550. Ryan, do you want to answer this one? Yep. Perfect. Good answer, and I know it was hard for some of you in the back to hear. You've probably heard me mention it before, but put yourself in a buyer's, consumption. Like, how are buyers consuming? They're online, looking at properties online. Do they have a price range they're looking in? Yeah. And so when you're on Zillow or on any of these Utah real estate, when you're selecting the price range, does it let you put in like I just want to go up to 543, 715? No, it doesn't do that. It usually will do it in increments of 25, 50, and 100. Am I right? If you've ever been a buyer for a property, you can select your range usually in increments of 25, 50, and 100. And so 543 is the same price range as 550, is it not? It's going to appeal to the same buyers. So here's a real common mistake that hopefully you'll never make. And that is, a lot of people, if the value was like about 500, they're going to be like, I'm clever, I'm going to put this price at $499.9. Do we see that all the time on the MLS? Homes priced at the whatever 99.9s are? Now what happens to the buyer that starts their search at 500? They're $10 away or $100 away from even looking at that property. How many of you guys have bought homes? When you bought a home, did you put a minimum, like I'm not looking below this price because like I know what I'm gonna get there and that's not for me? Do you do that? Is that usually a whole number, right? Okay, do you see what I'm saying? So understand the pricing strategy is not just driven by our market dynamics or our CMA, but also understand that it's driven by how consumers are gonna be consuming, property online, right? That's how they're doing their shopping. So now hopefully that'll help you guys have a better idea of how to do a CMA. So there's one other thought that I have on this too. I typically will not stop with just doing sold properties in a CMA. I will more often than not include active and pending properties in there just to see. Because if a seller says, no, my house is worth $575, and say, well, based off of the properties that didn't sell, you're correct. But what's the difference in value between the properties that didn't sell and the properties that sold? It's about 25 grand. Now, you do want to sell your property, right? Yes, I do. Okay, so we don't want to just have the property listed for sale, but you are actually telling me you want to sell the home. Okay, then they can demonstrate or see for themselves, here's what's active and why. Here's what's sold and why. Here's the difference between those two. Now you know. Does that make sense? And I'll do the same thing with pending properties as well. I don't always include them in a CMA, but oftentimes I like to have the information from my mind. Why? Because my mind is the seller's mind. The seller doesn't see the properties that sold. The sellers can only see the properties that are what? Don't think your seller's not on Zillow. Zillow in Utah, we don't show sold properties. We're a non-disclosure state. So what are they seeing? They're seeing active homes. So I need to get in my client's head before I ever get over there and already solve for what it is that they're looking at versus what I am looking at. That's why I'll put them in a CMA. Does that make sense, what I'm doing? You see what I'm saying? All right. Okay, any other kind of questions? Oh, I did talk about that. Never mind. The edit comp mode. I shared that little feature with you. It took me 12 years to actually use. Yes, Justin?
I'm just going to make one comment because all the time I've been successful about the appraisal is because they put the criteria so tight, they miss the comp that was right there.
Yeah, so that's a good point, and I've experienced this too, where their criteria was so tight that they missed a property that was right behind it or 2 houses up from it, right? And then I'll pull that out, and as long as it's a like-kind property, I'll include that in the dispute and say, is there a reason why you didn't use this? And let them tell me, because normally they'll come back and say, well, yeah, it's because I had these parameters, and okay, would you or would you not agree if you were a buyer that that's a like-kind property? Yeah, I'd agree with it. So do you have any problem including this one? No, I think it makes sense. Okay, great. You know, how often are you successful, by the way, at disputing appraisals? Not very often. Not me neither. I mean, having done thousands and thousands of these things at this point, I still am not like all that successful. I have been. I know how to do it, but most of the time, appraisers have made up their mind by the time they click submit, just so you know. So sometimes we just have to order another appraisal or tell the buyers, sorry. They don't. It's unfortunate, but they don't, you know? All right. So one of the things, too, that you do is you want to make sure that if after you've done a CMA and you feel good about it, save it so it's there for you. Because then if you get out to the property and they're like, you know, maybe you discovered something that you didn't know, you can say, no problem, we can make adjustments. I'll come back and I'll just add a property or take a property out. Okay? But it's useful to have. If I ever want to update a CMA, now I've got all the information sitting in there. So save your stuff. It'll save you a lot of time. Hopefully all of you guys will get to the point where you're doing, you know, 5 to 10 listing appointments at least a month, you know, if not more than that. And when you're doing that kind of, you know, work, you need to be efficient up front. Save your comp searches, save your CMAs, so you don't have to redo the work. You don't have time for that. All right? Any other questions that you guys would want to talk about? I picked a fairly easy property to do a CMA on. I recognize that, right? Most of the time, I have people come to me with like, hey, could you help me with the CMA? And I'm like, holy shit, that's a tough one. You know, I'm willing to help look at any of your CMAs, you know, as long as you give me enough time. But here's the rule that I have. If you want me to kind of check your work, if you just want an opinion of value on something, you have to send me your work. I'm not going to do your work for you. I need to know you did your work, and then I'll look at it from my eyes. Is that fair? Because so I'm totally got your back, but I just want you to do the work. I don't work for money anymore. It's called retirement.
Price opinion?
Yeah. Yeah, what would it be called? Retired price opinion, I guess? A RISA price opinion? Yeah. All right, cool, kids. Yeah.